what's up, peeps and ponies? It's Burbrony here, and this is the first Commander deck tech for Magic the Gathering that I'm doing in my channel. So, give me a lot of love and like and subscribe to my channel. So, the Commander we will be working with is Chishiro, the Shattered Blade, which is a which is a 2 red green legendary creature snake samurai with whenever an aura or equipment enters the battlefield under my control, create a 2/2 red spirit creature token with menace. And at the beginning of my end step, put a +1/+1 counter on each modified creature I control. So that means equipment, auras I control, and counters count as modifications. So, with that taken care of, let's get into the into the actual deck. So we have the big boys, like Arcbound Slasher, which is a 4 red artifact creature cat with modular 4, which means this creature enters the battlefield with 4 +1/+1 counters on it, and when it dies, I may put its +1/+1 counters on target artifact creature. And it has Riot, which means this creature enters the battlefield with my choice of an additional +1/+1 counter or haste. So that's pretty useful, because the haste gives it a chance to attack on when it's first summoned. And then the next big boy we have is Savage-Born Hydra, which is a X red-green creature Hydra, which the X means that you can pay any amount of mana except for 0. And it has double strike, which means it can attack twice, and Savage-Born Hydra enters the battlefield with X +1/+1 counters on it. And if I pay 1 in a Gruul, and which means that I pay 1 in either a red or green, and I get to put a +1/+1 counter on Savage-Born Hydra and activate this ability only anytime I could cast a sorcery. So it comes in as a 0/0, but I can make it as big as I want. Then the next card I have is Colossal Dreadmaw, which is a 4 green creature dinosaur with trample, which means this creature can deal excess combat damage to the player or planeswalker it is attacking. And it comes in as a 6/6, so that's pretty useful. A 6/6 for 6 mana. And then the last of the cards that are big boys is Thundering Raiju, which is a 2 red creature spirit with haste, and whenever Thundering Raiju attacks, put a +1/+1 counter on target creature I control. Then Thundering Raiju deals X damage to each opponent, where X is the number of modified creatures I control other than Thundering Raiju. So any other creatures that are modified, I can just deal a whole bunch of damage to. Then I have 2 cards here that make my creatures evasive, like Cobbled Wings, for example, which is a 2 casting cost artifact equipment with equipped creature has flying and equip for 1, which means if I pay 1, I can attach the Cobbled Wings to target creature I control, but equip it only as a sorcery. And then the other evasive card is Haunted Cloak, which is a 3 casting cost artifact equipment with equipped creature has vigilance, trample, and haste, and I can equip it for 1. So that's useful. And then I have a whole bunch of cards that pump up my creatures. So let me just get those. So the cards I have are Bone Horde, which is a 4 casting cost artifact equipment with living weapon, which means when this equipment enters the battlefield, I create a 0/0 black germ creature token, then attach the Bone Horde to the germ. And equipped creature gets +X+X, where X is the number of creature cards in all graveyards, and I can equip it for 2. So I can make anything super big if there was a board wipe. And what that means is, like, if anybody destroys all the creatures in the battlefield. And the next card I have is Ceremonial Knife, which is a 1 casting cost artifact equipment with whenever equipped creature gets the equipped creature gets +1/+0 and has whenever this creature deals combat damage, you create a blood token, which the blood token is an artifact with pay 1, tap it, discard a card, and sacrifice the blood token to draw a card. And you can equip it for 2. And then the next card is Spider Silk Net, which is a 0 casting cost artifact equipment with equipped creature gets +0/+2 and has reach, which means it can block creatures with flying, which is pretty useful. And I can equip it for 2, which is big. And then the next one is Leather Armor, which is a 1 casting cost artifact equipment with equipped creature gets +0/+1 and has Ward 1, which the ward means whenever equipped creature becomes the target of a spell or ability an opponent controls, you counter it unless that player pays 1 mana. And you can equip it for 0, but activate it only once each turn. So that's the downside to it. Then the next card we have is Crystal Slipper, which is a 1 red artifact equipment with equipped creature gets +1/+0 and has haste. And you can equip it for 1, which is very useful. Then we have Haunted Plate Mail, which is a 4 casting cost artifact equipment with equipped creature gets +4/+4, but if you pay 0 until end of turn, Haunted Plate Mail becomes a 4/4 spirit artifact creature that's no longer an equipment, but activate this ability only if I control no creatures. And I can equip it for 4, which to me, that's pretty useful. Then I have Blackblade Reforged, which is a 2 casting cost legendary artifact equipment with equipped creature gets +1/+1 for each land I control. And I can equip a legendary creature for 3, but equip a normal creature for 7. So I would go with the 3 casting cost. Then the next card I have is Strider Harness, which is a 3 casting cost artifact equipment with equipped creature gets +1/+1 and has haste, and I can equip it for 1. Then the next card I have is Lightning Spear, which is a 1 red artifact equipment with equipped creature gets +1/+0 and has trample. But if I pay 2 and a red, sacrifice the Lightning Spear, it deals 3 damage to any target, which is really a pain in the butt for people to get through. But I can equip it for 1, which is also pretty a pain in the butt. And then I have Bone Saw, which is a 0 casting cost artifact equipment with equipped creature gets +1/+0, and I can equip it for 1. So you can bet dollars to donuts that this will be in pretty much any equipment deck. And then the next one I have is Bronze Sword, which is a 1 casting cost artifact equipment with equipped creature gets +2/+0, and I can equip it for 3. And the next one is Armory of Erois, which is an artifact equipment with whenever equipped creature attacks, I put a +1/+1 counter on it, and I can equip it for 2. So that's a really useful card to have. Then the next one I have is Belt of Giant Strength, which is a 1 green artifact equipment with equipped creature has base power and toughness 10/10. But you can equip it for 10, but this ability costs X less to cast or activate, where X is the power of the creature it targets. So let's say I had like a 6/6 creature out on the battlefield. I can equip the belt to the 6/6 creature and I can equip it for 4. So that's big. Then the next one I have is Scavenged Blade, which is a 1 red artifact equipment with, when Scavenged Blade enters the battlefield, attach it to target creature I control. And equipped creature gets +2/+0, and I can equip it for 2 and a red. So you can say that that would be a pretty mean card to have in your deck. Then the next card I have is Dragon Scale Boon, which is a 3 green instant that says put 2 +1/+1 counters on target creature and untap it. So that means if a creature was facing the side like this, they would then go back upwards like that. And that is pretty good. Then I have Claws of Valakut, which is a 1 red enchantment aura that says enchant creature. Enchanted creature gets +1/+0 for each mountain I control and has first strike. Why am I saying haste a lot? It's just something in my head that is just getting to me. Now the next card I have is Goblin War Paint, which is a 1 red enchantment aura that enchants a creature, and enchanted creature gets +2/+2 and has haste this time. So now I can say haste. Then the next card I have is Frenzied Rage, which is a 1 red enchantment aura that enchants a creature, and enchanted creature gets +2/+1 and has menace, which means it cannot be blocked except by 2 or more creatures. So you can have 2 creatures block that creature that you're attacking with, and it'll just take out 2 birds with 1 stone. Then the next one I have is Favor of Jukai, which is a 3 green enchantment aura that enchants an artifact or creature. And as long as enchanted permanent is a creature, it gets +3/+3 and has reach. And if I channel it for 1 and a green and discard Favor of Jukai, target creature gets +3/+3 and gains reach until end of turn. And the next one I have is Bravado, which is a 1 red enchantment aura, but on the card itself it says enchant creature, and it says enchanted creature gets +1/+1 for each other creature I control. So you can make this a big creature if you have a lot of creatures out on the battlefield. Then the next one I have is Cave Sense, which is a 1 red enchant creature that says enchanted creature gets +1/+1 and has Mountain Walk, which Mountain Walk means that it is unblockable as long as defending player controls a mountain. So if any of your opponents have a mountain on their side, my creature is unblockable to them. Then the next one I have is Aki Warpaint, which is a red enchantment aura that enchants an artifact or creature, and as long as enchanted permanent is a creature, it gets +2/+1. Then the next one I have is Gift of Wrath, which is a 3 red enchantment aura that enchants an artifact or creature. And as long as enchanted permanent is a creature, it gets +2/+2 and has menace. But when Gift of Wrath leaves the battlefield, I create a 2/2 red spirit creature token with menace. So that gives me tokens in return. Then the next card I have is Careful Cultivation, which is a 2 green enchantment aura that enchants an artifact or creature, and as long as the enchanted permanent is a creature, it gets +1/+3 and has reach, and tap it to add green. But if I channel the Careful Cultivation, which means I pay 1 and a green, discard Careful Cultivation, I create a 1/1 green human monk creature token with tap it to add green. So that kind of makes me mana. Then the next card I have is Hammerhand, which is a red enchantment aura that enchants a creature, and when Hammerhand enters the battlefield, target creature cannot block this turn. And enchanted creature gets +1/+1 and has haste. So that's a pretty good card. Then the next one I have is Undying Rage, which is a 2 red enchantment aura that enchants a creature, and enchanted creature gets +2/+2 and cannot block. And when Undying Rage is put into a graveyard from the battlefield, return Undying Rage to its owner's hand. So that kind of brings it back to me. Then the next one I have is Howl of the Hunt, which is a 2 green enchantment aura with flash, which means I can play it at instant speed. And if nobody knows, there are 2 main spell types, which are instants and sorceries. Back then in Magic, when it was before, there used to be interrupts, which were faster than instants. And now the interrupts are not used as much anymore. So this has flash, but also you enchant a creature, and when Howl of the Hunt enters the battlefield, if enchanted creature is a wolf or werewolf, untap that creature, but also enchanted creature gets +2/+2 and has vigilance. And if you don't know what vigilance does, that whenever you're attacking with a creature, it does not tap when you're attacking. Then the next card I have is Gigantiform, which is a 3 green enchantment aura with Kicker 4, and you don't need to worry about the Kicker 4 ability because I'll tell you in a second. So you enchant the creature, but enchanted creature is 8/8 and has trample. And when Gigantiform enters the battlefield, if it was kicked, you may search your library for a card named Gigantiform and put it onto the battlefield, then shuffle your library, which is your deck. And the last of all the pump cards is Courage in Crisis, which is a 2 green sorcery with put a +1/+1 counter on target creature, and then proliferate, which proliferate means you choose any number of permanents and or players, then give each another counter of each kind already there. So I can put as many +1/+1 counters on my creatures as I want. Then I have some cards that I call whatever cards, which are Foundry Inspector, which is a 3 casting cost artifact creature construct with artifact spells I cast cost 1 less to cast. So that makes my artifacts cheaper. Then I have Fertilid, which is a 2 green creature elemental with it enters the battlefield with 2 +1/+1 counters on it. And if I pay 1 and a green, remove a +1/+1 counter from Fertile Lid, target player searches their deck for a basic land card, puts it onto the battlefield tapped, then shuffles their deck. So it just tutors for me. Then the next whatever card I have is Simian Sling, which is a red artifact creature equipment monkey, which equipped creature gets +1/+1, but whenever Simian Sling or equipped creature becomes blocked, it deals 1 damage to target defending player. And I can reconfigure it for 2, which means if I pay 2, I can attach it to target creature I control, or unattach it from a creature. But reconfiguring can only be played as a sorcery. And while attached, the Simian Sling is not a creature. Then, the next whatever card I have is Bearer of Memory, which is a 2 green enchantment creature human monk with pay 5 and a green to put a +1/+1 counter on target enchantment creature, and it gains trample until end of turn. So that kind of is whatever, but it's kind of a big deal because it gives itself a +1/+1 counter. Then the last of the whatever cards is Find the Path, which is a 2 green enchantment aura which enchants a land, and when Find the Path enters the battlefield, I venture into the dungeon, which means I enter the first room or advance to the next room of the dungeon. But Enchanted Land has tap to add 2 green, which is pretty useful. Then the next set of cards that I have is Mana Rocks and Dorks, which Mana Rocks and Dorks are just cards that are worth a small amount of mana but give mana back to me. Like, for example, Commander's Sphere is a 3 casting cost artifact with tap it to add 1 mana of any color in my commander's color identity, and if I sacrifice Commander's Sphere, I draw a card. So that is useful. Then I have Gruul Locket, which is a 3 casting cost artifact with tap it to add red or green, and if I pay Gruul, which is 4 red and or green, and tap it and sacrifice Gruul Locket, I draw 2 cards. So that could be useful. Then I have Nyx Lotus, which is a 4 casting cost legendary artifact which enters the battlefield tapped, which is kind of a downside to it. But if I tap it, I choose a color and add an amount of mana of that color equal to my devotion of that color. So that means if I had let's say 7 green mana and I chose green, I would get 7 green mana right off the bat, which is huge. And then we have a very staple card in Magic the Gathering Commander, which is Soul Ring. And it's a 1 casting cost artifact that taps to add colorless. So that means it adds 2 colorless mana. And then the next one I have is Moss Diamond, which is a 2 casting cost artifact that enters the battlefield tapped, but if I tap it, I add green mana. Then I have Arcane Signet, which is a 2 casting cost artifact that taps to add 1 mana of any color in my commander's color identity. So that's useful. Then I have Fire Diamond, which is a 2 casting cost artifact which enters the battlefield tapped, but if I tap it, I add a red mana. So it works just like the Moss Diamond, except it's red. Then I have Tome of the Guild Pact, which is a 5 casting cost artifact with Whenever I cast a multicolored spell, I draw a card. Then I tap it to add 1 mana of any color. So that's useful. And then the last of the mana rocks, which are just artifacts that create mana, is Mana Geode, which is a 3 casting cost artifact with, when Mana Geode enters the battlefield, scry 1, which scry means that I look at the top card of my deck and choose to either put it on the top of my library or the bottom. And then I tap it to add 1 mana of any color, which is useful. Now for the mana dorks, which are Alloy Mirror, which is a 3 casting cost artifact creature that's a mirror. And if I tap it, I add 1 mana of any color in my mana pool. So that's useful. Then I have Arbor Elf, which is a green creature elf druid that taps to untap a target forest. So that is really useful. Then I have Copper Mirror, which is a 2 casting cost artifact creature that's a mirror, but if I tap it, I add green to my mana pool, which also is useful. Then I have Dawnheart Rejuvenator, which is a 3 green creature human warlock with, when a Dawnheart Rejuvenator enters the battlefield, I gain 3 life. And I tap it to add 1 mana of any color, which is really good. Then I have 3 cards that do exactly the same thing, which I have Elvish Mystic, which is a green creature elf druid that taps to add green to my mana pool, and it's a 1/1. Then I have Findhorn Elves, which is a green creature elf druid that taps to add green, which is also a 1/1. And then Llanowar Elves, which is a green creature elf druid that taps to add green, which is also a 1/1. So yeah, that's what I meant by they're all the same. Then I have Iron Mirror, which is a 2 casting cost artifact creature mirror that taps to add red to my mana pool. So it works just like the Copper Mirror, except it's red. Then the last of the mana dorks is Mannequin, which is a 2 casting cost artifact creature construct with tap to add colorless to my mana pool. So that's useful. Then I have 2 recursion cards, which means they return stuff from my graveyard to wherever. Then, and they are Elixir of Immortality, which is a 1 casting cost artifact with pay 2 and tap the Elixir of Immortality, and I gain 5 life and shuffle Elixir of Immortality and my graveyard into their owner's library. So that is pretty useful for if you want to recur your graveyard. And the other recursion card is Felden's Cane, which is a 1 casting cost artifact with tap it to reshuffle your graveyard into your library, then remove Felden's Cane from the game, which in Magic's terms is exile. And then the next 2 cards are also protection spells for my commander, which are Lightning Greaves, which is a 2 casting cost artifact equipment with equipped creature has haste and cannot be the target of spells or abilities, and it's equipped for 0, which means that I can equip it for free. And the other protection spell is Heroic Intervention, which is a 1 green instant that says permanents I control gain hexproof and indestructible until end of turn. So that is really useful for if you want to protect your commander. And then I have 2 what I call tutor cards, which they search for cards in my deck. So first off, we have Nissa's Renewal, which is a 5 green sorcery, which says, search my library for up to 3 basic land cards, put them onto the battlefield tapped, then shuffle my library, and I gain 7 life. So that's useful, because it gains me life and gains me mana. Then I have Cultivate, which is a 2 green sorcery with search my library for up to 2 basic land cards, reveal those cards and put one onto the battlefield tapped and the other into my hand, then I shuffle my library. So that would be a pretty useful card to have. Then I have a very powerful planeswalker, which is Arlinn the Pack's Hope, which is a 2 red-green legendary planeswalker that's Arlinn, and she has Daybound, which means that when she enters, it becomes day, but she comes in with 4 loyalty counters, and if I +1 her until my next turn, I may cast creature cards as though they had flash, and each creature I control that enters the battlefield it comes in with an additional +1/+1 counter on it. But if I -3 Arlinn, I create 2/2 green wolf creature tokens. And then if it becomes night, she flips over to become Arlinn the Moon's Fury, which if I +2 Arlinn, I add red and green to my mana. And then if I 0 her ability until end of turn, Arlinn the Moon's Fury becomes a 5/5 werewolf creature with trample, indestructible, and haste. So that is pretty useful. And then the most important card out of all of this deck is Dragonspark Reactor, which is a 1 red artifact with whenever Dragonspark Reactor or another artifact enters the battlefield under my control, put a charge counter on Dragonspark Reactor. But if I pay 4 and sacrifice the Dragonspark Reactor, it deals damage equal to the number of charge counters on it to target player and that much damage to up to 1 target creature. So that is pretty big if you want to get rid of some big creatures. And now we're getting on to the mana, which is the lands. So the first land that I have is Blighted Woodland, which taps to add colorless, and if I pay 3 and a green, tap it, and sacrifice Blighted Woodland, I search my library for up to 2 basic land cards, put them onto the battlefield tapped, then I shuffle my library, which is pretty good. Then I have Beside You Who Endures, which if I just play it for its regular, I tap it to add green. But if I channel it, which means I pay 1 and a green, and discard Beside You Who Endures, I destroy target artifact, enchantment, or non-basic land an opponent controls, then that player may search their library for a land with a basic land type and put it onto the battlefield, then I shuffle. And this ability costs 1 less to cast for each legendary creature I control. So that's pretty good. Then I have Crag Crown Pathway, which Crag Crown Pathway taps to add red, but I can choose the other side, which is Timber Crown Pathway, to tap it to add green. Then the next one I have is Dwarven Mine, which is a land that's a mountain that if I tap it I add red mana, and Dwarven Mine enters the battlefield tapped unless I control 3 or more other mountains. And when Dwarven Mine enters the battlefield untapped, I create a 1/1 red dwarf creature token. And then the next one I have is Exotic Orchard, which is a land that taps to add 1 mana of any color that a land an opponent controls could produce. Then I have Forgotten Cave, which enters the battlefield tapped, but if I tap it to add red, or I could cycle the Forgotten Cave for a red, which means if I pay a red and discard the Forgotten Cave, I draw a card, which is useful. Then I have Fungal Reaches, which is a land that taps to add colorless, but if I pay 1 and tap the Fungal Reaches, I put a storage counter on Fungal Reaches. But if I pay 1 and remove X storage counters from Fungal Reaches, I add X mana in any combination of red and or green. So that's pretty useful. The next one I have is Gingerbread Cabin, which is a land that's a forest that taps to add green, and Gingerbread Cabin enters the battlefield tapped unless I control 3 or more other forests. And when Gingerbread Cabin enters the battlefield untapped, I create a food token, which is just an artifact with pay 2, tap it, and sacrifice. You gain 3 life. So, whoop-de-pickle. You're gaining life. Then the next one I have is Gruul Guildgate. And that is a land that's a gate, which Gruul Guildgate enters the battlefield tapped, but if I tap it, I add red or green to my mana. Then the next one I have is Gruul Turf, which Gruul Turf enters the battlefield tapped, and when Gruul Turf enters the battlefield, I return a land I control to its owner's hand, which in Magic's terms is a bounce land. And if I tap it, I add red and green. And then Rugged Highlands says that it enters the battlefield tapped, but when Rugged Highlands enters the battlefield, I gain 1 life. And if I tap it, I add red or green to my mana. And then the next one I have is Slagwood's Bridge, which is an artifact land that enters the battlefield tapped, but it has indestructible, which means it cannot be destroyed at all. But it also taps to add red or green to my mana, which is useful. Then I have Stomping Ground, which is a land that's a mountain and a forest, which if I tap it, I add red or green. And as Stomping Ground enters the battlefield, I may pay 2 life. If I do not, it enters the battlefield tapped. So that means if I pay the 2 life, it comes in untapped. But if I do not pay the 2 life, it enters tapped. So that's kind of okay, which means you're going to be 2 life less than what you start with. Then the next card I have is Thriving Bluff, which enters the battlefield tapped, but as Thriving Bluff enters the battlefield, I choose a color other than red, which I would choose green, for example. And if I tap it, I add red or 1 mana of the chosen color, which would be green. Then the next one I have is Timber Gorge, which is a land that enters the battlefield tapped, but if I tap it, I add red or green. So that's pretty useful. Then the next one I have is Unknown Shores, which taps to add 1 colorless to my mana pool, or if I pay 1 and tap it, I add 1 mana of any color to my mana pool, which is pretty useful. And the last of the non-basic lands is Vivid Grove, which enters the battlefield tapped with 2 charge counters on it. But if I tap it, I add green to my mana. But if I tap it and remove a charge counter from Vivid Grove, I add 1 mana of any color to my mana pool. And then we have the basic lands, which we have which we have 8 forests right here, which 2 of them are not the same as the others. Then I also have 8 mountains right here. So, and the tokens that I have, which I'm missing 1, which is the 2/2 red spirit creature token with menace. So the ones that I have here are a blood token, a dungeon of the Mad Mage, which is one of the dungeons, the Lost Mine of Phandelver, which is another dungeon, the Tomb of Annihilation, which is the 3rd dungeon, a food token, a goblin token, a human monk token, a skeleton token, the Atrapal, which is a legendary token creature that is a god horror with death touch, a treasure token, a wolf token, a dwarf token, a Phyrexian germ token, which is just the germ, and the day token, which also on the other side is the night token. So those are all the tokens, and that is it for the whole entire deck. So thanks for watching, guys, and please like and subscribe to my channel, and I will see you all in another Commander Deck Tech. Peace!